I'm sorry, son, but your entire life's been built on a lie. The taller agent's voice cut through the humming of my refrigerator and the faint traffic outside my window. Two men in dark suits sat across from me in my tiny apartment above Mason's Hardware, their badges gleaming under the flickering light. Agent Cole handed me a photograph, an older man with silver hair standing before a sprawling estate tucked between snow-covered peaks. "Do you recognize him?" Cole asked. Something inside me lurched. The man's eyes, gray, sharp, familiar, made the air feel heavier. "That's your father," Agent Cole said quietly. "Richard Halden. He's been searching for you since February 3rd, 1990, the day you were kidnapped from a ski resort in Switzerland. My name used to be Daniel Price. At least, that's what I thought for the last 16 years. Daniel, the lucky orphan from Romania, adopted by an American family, who told me I should be grateful they saved me. But the two agents sitting across from me weren't here to talk about luck. They were here to tell me I wasn't Daniel Price at all. My real name was Ethan Halden, and I was the missing heir to a multi-billion-dollar private banking dynasty." Agent Miller, the younger one with the quiet eyes, opened his laptop and turned it toward me. "These are the account records connected to your trust, Mr. Halden. 95 million US dollars, untouched for decades, except, as it turns out, by the people who raised you." He clicked. The screen filled with transfer logs, offshore accounts, and names I recognized. Mark and Lila Price. My throat closed up. The people who made me sleep in a damp storage room above their garage, who fed me leftovers while their real son, Tyler, got steak dinners, had been stealing from me the entire time. Cole leaned forward. They withdrew about $2 million every year. Forged signatures, fake shell companies, the works. In total, they've siphoned almost $50 million from your inheritance. My hands trembled. How could they even pull that off? The adoption papers, the orphanage story, everything looked official. Because it was official, Cole said grimly. Whoever orchestrated this knew exactly how to manipulate international law. They had access to your family's financial systems, your father's security codes, even your mother's medical records. He paused. "Ethan, it was your uncle, Charles Halden." The name hit me like a punch. CH. Those were the initials I'd found etched into the brass lockbox hidden behind Mark's tool bench. The same initials on the Swiss number Lila used to call late at night when she thought I was asleep. Agent Miller slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of contracts, phone logs, and, most chilling of all, a photograph of Lila Price standing outside a Swiss estate, decades younger, wearing a nanny's uniform. "She worked for the Halden family before your kidnapping," Miller explained. "Charles hired the Prices to take you during a family ski trip, make it appear you died in an avalanche, and raise you under a false identity in the States. In exchange, he gave them access to your trust." I stared at the documents, my pulse roaring in my ears. Why would my uncle do that? Cole flipped open another file, an old legal document written in German, with an English translation beneath it. Under Swiss inheritance law, if you died before your 30th birthday, your fortune and voting rights in the Halden Bank would revert to your closest living relative, Charles. He looked me straight in the eye. He couldn't risk killing a 2-year-old. Too obvious. So he had you hidden, broken down, and planned to stage an accident once you turned 30. The silence in the room was suffocating. My 30th birthday was in 6 months. 6 months until the date my uncle had circled in red on the calendar of my stolen life. I stood up, pacing, the photograph of my father still trembling in my hand. The faces of Mark and Lila flashed through my mind. Every cruel word, every punishment that now had a new, monstrous context. They hadn't adopted me out of kindness. They'd been guarding an investment. Cole rose, his voice steady but low. "Mr. Halden, we can protect you. But you need to understand, Charles doesn't know we found you yet. He'll move fast once he realizes the truth." Outside, a car engine idled somewhere on the street. I walked to the window, my reflection fractured in the cracked glass. For 28 years, I'd been a ghost in my own life. Now I knew my real name, my real bloodline, and the man who wanted me dead. "The Prices have been telling everyone you were unstable, depressed, struggling to adjust," Agent Cole said quietly, leaning back in his chair. "Your father never accepted your death. Richard Halden spent nearly 3 decades and millions tracking you down. Private investigators, consultants, even psychics. He followed every lead, no matter how far-fetched. The Swiss authorities legally declared you dead after 7 years, but your Uncle Charles tried to convince him to give up. Richard refused. He always knew, somehow, that you were alive. I felt my chest tighten. Every harsh word, every punishment from Mark and Lila, every night I went to bed cold and hungry. It all shifted in meaning. Their cruelty wasn't arbitrary. It was carefully calculated, a means to control me until the day my inheritance could be claimed. Agent Miller's voice broke through my thoughts. We're here to bring you home. Your father is waiting in Zurich. The Prices are being arrested as we speak. Charles Halden was detained an hour ago at the airport, attempting to flee to Brazil. It's over, Ethan. You're free. The name? Ethan felt alien at first, but as I said it aloud, a strange sense of rightness settled over me. I wasn't Daniel Price anymore, the unwanted Romanian orphan scraping by on scraps of affection. I was someone loved, sought after, mourned, and never forgotten. I was Ethan Halden, and I was finally going home. Life in the Price household in rural Nebraska had revolved around 3 ironclad rules. Obey without question, never mention Romania, and express endless gratitude for the roof over my head. Every morning began with Lila pounding on my bedroom door at 5 a.m., the sound reverberating through the thin walls of the storage room above the garage. Daniel, up, she would bark. Do you think food appears by magic? The storage room measured just 8 by 10 feet. In winter, frost crept along the single window pane. In summer, the metal roof turned the space into a furnace. My bed was a thin camping cot, my possessions limited to 2 changes of clothes and a worn blanket Lila claimed came from her charitable contributions. Tyler, their biological son, had a spacious bedroom in the main house, complete with gaming setup, mini fridge, and private bathroom. Entry was strictly forbidden without permission. Days followed a rigid routine. 15 minutes at the utility sink in the garage to wash up, breakfast consisting of leftovers or plain toast if Tyler's appetite had depleted the supplies. Mark would sit at the kitchen table, newspaper spread open, ignoring my presence unless I made the slightest noise. Then his hand would lash out, leaving marks on my wrist. You sound like a herd of elephants, he would sneer. Were you raised in a barn in Romania? I started working at Mason's Hardware when I turned 16, thanks to a favor Mark had called in. Lucky for you, Mr. Donovan owed me, he'd said. Otherwise, who would hire a Romanian orphan with no skills? Every paycheck went straight to the Prices, carefully circumventing me. Room and board, Lila would call it. Room, a cramped closet above the garage. Board, the scraps from the family's table. Yet Mr. Donovan, the hardware store owner, seemed to see the injustice. He would occasionally slip me lunch, or even a $20 bill, claiming I'd earned a bonus. Smart kid, he would say. You've got potential. You could go to college. Make something of yourself. The suggestion of higher education had been a dangerous idea. When I mentioned community college at dinner, Mark dragged me to the garage and whipped me with his belt until I couldn't sit comfortably for a week. College? You can barely speak English properly with that Romanian brain of yours, he spat. The cruel irony burned in my memory. I spoke perfect English, had always excelled in school, had always yearned for more than the cage of lies and abuse. And now, decades later, Agent Cole and Agent Miller were giving me the truth, a chance to reclaim my identity, my freedom, and the life that had been stolen from me. For the first time, I realized every hardship, every insult, every blow had been part of a system designed to break me. But it hadn't worked. I was still here. And for the first time in my life, I had a real home waiting. If I had truly spent my first 5 years in a Romanian orphanage, wouldn't I have carried an accent? Wouldn't I remember more than the fragments of language that haunted me in dreams? But questions brought pain, and I learned quickly to swallow every doubt. My body bore testimony to that silence. The faded mark on my left forearm, a deep cord imprint, was from when I was 7, punishment for asking if I had any siblings back in Romania. The circular burns on my shoulder came from Lila's cigarette when I was 10, discovered while she found me flipping through a book about Eastern Europe. The long scar across my lower back was from Mark's belt buckle at 14, the day I dared to ask why there were no photos of me before I turned 6. You came to us with nothing but disease and bad habits, Lila would say, her tone almost gentle, her words wrapping cruelty in a velvet of care. We made you civilized. We taught you American values. We saved you from dying in some godforsaken foreign country. Her voice had a way of twisting malice into concern, turning abuse into a supposed kindness. Tyler, 5 years older than me, had grown up seeing me as both servant and spectacle. When his friends came over, he would parade me as the charity case his parents had taken in. Tyler went off to Yale on what the prices called hard-earned savings, while I was denied even a GED prep course. I walked 3 miles to Mason's Hardware every day in bitter Nebraska winters, wind chills slicing at 20 below, watching him drive past in his BMW. Isolation cut deeper than the blows ever could. No friends, no social life, no phone, because Lila said I might get ideas. No internet, because Mark claimed I'd use it for crime like all foreigners from the East. The only humans who showed any care were Mr. Donovan and Mrs. Brennan at the post office, whose eyes held genuine concern when they asked how I was doing. Still, tiny cracks had appeared in the narrative they'd built around me. Late at night, I'd sometimes hear Mark speaking on the phone in what sounded like German, not English. I once saw Lila burning photographs in the backyard, pictures of grand estates far beyond anything I'd imagined in Romania. And then there were the dreams, recurring since childhood, a woman with golden hair singing in a language that wasn't Romanian or English, yet somehow felt like home. Everything began to unravel 3 weeks ago when I tried to get a passport. Mr. Donovan had invited me to Canada for his niece's wedding and a furniture expo in Toronto afterward. "You could use a vacation, Daniel," he said. "When's the last time you left Nebraska?" I hadn't left Nebraska. I didn't tell him that. Mrs. Brennan at the post office handled the paperwork, her careful hands and decades of federal experience making her a meticulous guide. But as she reviewed my documents, her brow furrowed. "Daniel, these adoption papers, something's off about the seal. And this orphanage name? I've never seen Romanian institutions formatted like this." She looked over her reading glasses. "Let me make some calls. I know someone at the State Department who specializes in Eastern European documentation." That night, Mark was waiting in my room. His hand clamped around my throat before I could even hear him enter. His face was purple, veins bulging, breath reeking of whiskey and rage. "What did you tell them at the post office?" "Nothing," I gasped, clawing at his grip. I had only wanted a passport. He shoved me against the wall so hard that the drywall cracked. "You don't need to go anywhere. Your place is here. Call that woman tomorrow and tell her you've changed your mind." He leaned close, voice dropping to a whisper that sent ice through my veins. "If you don't, I'll make you wish you'd died in that orphanage." Every instinct screamed at me. The cruelty, the fear, the calculated control, it wasn't random. It was a cage designed to break me, to keep me small, to ensure I stayed invisible. Yet even in that moment, in the bruises and terror, something inside me refused to bend. Something whispered that the truth existed beyond Mark and Lila's lies. That someday I would find it. Mrs. Brennan had already started her quiet investigation. Unknown to the Prices or me, she had discovered something that nobody else had noticed. The orphanage listed on my adoption papers, Sunrise Children's Home in Bucharest, had been closed by the Romanian government 5 years before my supposed adoption. The official seal on the documents was flawless, but forged. The agency that had supposedly handled my case never even existed. She immediately contacted the FBI's fraud division. After that night, the punishments escalated. Lila began locking my door from the outside after every dinner. They confiscated my ancient flip phone, claiming I might get ideas above my station. Mark installed a padlock on the garage door. In every sense but name, I had become a prisoner. Meanwhile, Agent Cole had begun tracing connections no one else had seen. Mrs. Brennan's findings had triggered a facial recognition search across missing persons databases. My driver's license photo, taken only 2 years ago, matched with age progression software to a 1987 case. A 2-year-old boy named Ethan Halden, kidnapped from an exclusive ski resort in Switzerland. His father, Richard Halden, owner of Switzerland's largest private bank, had never stopped searching. The Prices grew more paranoid by the day. Through the grimy window of my room, I saw Mark burning stacks of documents in a metal drum in the backyard. 20 years of careful records reduced to smoke and ash. Lila patrolled the yard, scanning the street for unfamiliar cars, speaking in rapid, coded phrases that made no sense to me. Then, one night, the arrangement faltered. Lila forgot to lock my door properly. I slipped quietly downstairs, pressed against the wall, and overheard her in the kitchen, speaking into her phone. "He knows nothing," she whispered. "But they're closing in. Charles wants to accelerate the plan. We can't wait for his birthday." My stomach turned when she added, "Just make it look like a suicide. The kid's depressed enough that everyone will believe it." The next evening, Tyler staggered into the garage, reeking of expensive scotch, liquor his parents kept locked in Mark's office. I was at the bench, scrubbing tools, part of my daily humiliation. "Must be nice," he slurred, grinning. "Being worth 95 million while pretending to be a poor orphan." "What are you talking about?" I asked, placing the wrench down. His eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed with that twisted satisfaction of knowing something I didn't. "Oh, you really don't know?" he sneered. "Mom and Dad have been siphoning from your trust fund for 26 years. 2 million a year, like clockwork. Who do you think paid for my Yale tuition? This house. The cars? Everything we have comes from your money. You pathetic fool." I shook my head. "That's impossible. You're lying." Tyler laughed, dragging his finger across the screen of his phone. He held up a screenshot from his mother's computer, a Swiss bank statement in the name of the Ethan Halden Trust. The balance was enough to make my knees buckle. "In 6 months," he said, "the money transfers to your name. If you even live that long." It hit me then. I wasn't just a prisoner. I was a resource, harvested, with an expiration date. That night, after Tyler's drunken confession, I made a choice. The house was silent by 2 a.m., Mark's snores echoing from the master bedroom. I retrieved a butter knife I had hidden weeks earlier and began working the lock on my door, a skill honed from years of captivity. I knew the creaks of the hallway floorboards, every squeak memorized during my few sanctioned trips to the bathroom. Mark's office was a fortress, a deadbolt he checked obsessively, a symbol of control. But Tyler's drunken carelessness had left the door slightly ajar, his father's keys still dangling in the lock. I slipped inside, heart hammering, each breath loud in the quiet house. For the first time in years, I felt the fragile hope of reclaiming my life, and finally stepping into the world that had been stolen from me. The room reeked of cigar smoke and that sharp, aggressive cologne Mark always wore, the kind that demanded attention and respect, or at least tried to. His desk was solid mahogany, expensive, and I now understood, purchased with my own stolen money. The drawers were locked, but the same butter knife that had freed me from my room worked its magic here as well. In the bottom drawer, hidden behind hanging files labeled with fake business names, I found a secret compartment. Inside lay the blueprint of my stolen life, recorded with meticulous precision. Swiss bank statements stretched back decades, each showing systematic withdrawals of exactly 2 million francs, converted into dollars. The account name jumped out at me, Ethan Richard Halden Trust. My real name, the one they had tried to erase, stared back at me. Photographs were stacked carefully, each in plastic sheaths as though touching them could be dangerous. A toddler with blonde hair laughed between a distinguished man and a beautiful woman, the backdrop a mansion out of a storybook. The boy wore a tiny blue coat with silver buttons. I had nightmares about those buttons for years, though only now did I understand why. A yellowed letter, written in German on the letterhead of a Swiss law firm, described the custody transfer, permanent guardianship, tragic death, and at the bottom, the signature, Charles Halden. Another document in English followed, instructions for the prices. The boy must never know his origins. Raise him humble, broken if necessary. Monthly reports required. At age 30, the full inheritance transfers, then the arrangement ends. Permanent solution authorized. My stomach dropped at that last line. Permanent solution. They planned to kill me in 6 months, staging it as the demise of a depressed orphan. The town would accept it without question. Lila had spent years crafting the narrative, painting me as troubled, unstable, beyond repair. I uncovered more. Forged medical records claiming behavioral disorders, fake psychiatric evaluations warning against higher education, even a draft suicide note in what looked like my handwriting, but wasn't. They had practiced my signature, preparing for my death like it was a business transaction. Using Mark's ancient desktop, I photographed everything with a digital camera I found in the drawer, likely used to document their investment for Charles. The computer was still logged into his email, revealing years of correspondence coded to hide the truth. The package remains stable. Monthly withdrawal confirmed. Timeline proceeding as planned. One email, from just a week ago, made my next move obvious. Local post office employee is asking questions. May need to accelerate timeline. Advise immediate action. I couldn't remove the physical documents without raising alarms, but I found a USB drive and copied everything from the computer. Emails, bank records, scanned letters, even a video file labeled EH1987. I didn't watch it, but I knew what it contained, evidence of my kidnapping. Then, something compelled me to dial the most recent Swiss number in Mark's phone history. The line rang twice before a woman answered in German, switching to accented English. Mr. Price, is the situation contained? Charles is concerned about the recent inquiries. I hung up immediately, my whole body trembling. Charles Halden, HK. My father's brother. My own uncle had orchestrated everything. I replaced every file exactly as I found it, memorized each detail, then waited until 4 a.m. The house was still, the darkness absolute. I climbed out my window, gripping the oak tree I had memorized branch by branch over 16 years. My feet knew the cracked sidewalks perfectly, honed from countless walks to Mason's hardware. 6 blocks later, Mrs. Brennan's porch light flicked on before I could knock. She opened the door in her robe, eyes calm, unsparing, as if she had been expecting me all along. Daniel, or whoever you really are, I've been expecting you, Mrs. Brennan said, her voice calm, unwavering. 2 federal agents have been asking about you. They're staying at the Marriott downtown. I've already called them. She handed me her phone. They're on their way. The next morning arrived with ruthless precision. From Mrs. Brennan's living room window, I watched 40 FBI agents descend on the Price household at exactly 6 a.m. Agent Cole had insisted I stay inside, but I couldn't resist seeing it unfold. I needed to witness my prison crumble. Mark burst through the front door in nothing but underwear, scrambling toward his truck. An agent tackled him into the gravel driveway, the stones grinding against his face, stones I had spent years spreading by hand every summer. Lila followed, screaming, wrapped in a silk robe bought with my own money. You can't prove anything, she yelled. We adopted him legally. We have papers. Forged papers. Agent Cole's voice cut through the yard via megaphone. Lila and Mark Price, you are under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Tyler tried to flee through the back door, but ran straight into a wall of agents. The shock on his face as they cuffed him made 26 years of abuse almost feel worth it. Almost. By noon, I was seated in a federal building in Omaha, watching Agent Cole and Agent Miller lay out the evidence that would destroy the people who had stolen my childhood. It was overwhelming. The Price's greed had left them sloppy, files they should have burned, digital footprints they assumed would never be traced. Your DNA results came back an hour ago, Agent Miller said, sliding a paper across the table. 99.97% match to Richard Halden. You are definitively his son. The real revelation came when Lila cracked under questioning. Through one-way glass, I watched as Agent Cole played the security footage I had found on Mark's computer. A ski resort in Switzerland, October 15, 1987. Young Lila, in a nanny's uniform, walked away with a small boy as chaos erupted around them. Avalanche warnings had sent everyone scrambling, and in the confusion, one child vanished with the wrong adult. You want immunity? Lila snarled at the agents. Then, almost casually, I'll give you something better. The man who orchestrated it all. Charles Halden. My own uncle. She leaned forward, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. He approached us in 1986 while I was working for a Swiss family. He knew Mark from his military connections, knew we could remove a child and make it look legitimate. The agents exchanged glances. He paid us $50,000 up front, promised $2 million a year from the boys' trust fund. He had every detail, knew when the family would be at the resort, knew avalanche warnings would give cover. He even arranged forged adoption papers through contacts in Eastern Europe. The Romanian Orphan story? His idea. Who would question it? The Iron Curtain was still up. Records impossible to verify. Why kidnap his own nephew? Agent Cole asked. Lila laughed, bitter and sharp. Money. Power. Everything. If Ethan died or disappeared, Charles would inherit the entire Halden banking empire. But killing a toddler outright? Too suspicious. So he played the long game. Keep the boy hidden until Swiss inheritance law allowed him to claim everything at 30, then eliminate him. Stage it as suicide. No one would question the death of a troubled foreign orphan with a supposed history of mental health issues. She revealed even more. Charles had been embezzling from the family bank for decades, using my disappearance to cover his tracks. Shell companies, phantom investments, all masked by the grief of my father, Richard, who had handed Charles full operational control. He visited once, Lila said, almost nonchalantly, when the boy was 10. Wanted to make sure we were breaking him properly. I felt the weight of those words sink into my bones. Every cruel word, every punishment, every lie. It had all been part of a plan to keep me small, to feed the ambitions of a man willing to destroy his own family for power. And now, finally, justice was catching up. I stood frozen in the hallway, watching Mark lash Tyler with a belt, a cruel smile spreading across his face. My stomach turned, and I ran to the bathroom, dry heaving. The thought that my own uncle had sanctioned every bit of this, the approval of Charles Halden haunting me, made my nausea worse than the physical memory of those strikes. 3 hours later, my life shifted again. Richard Halden appeared on the screen during our video call, and my breath caught. His eyes were mine. No, mine were his, and they searched mine as if they had known me all along. Tears carved lines down his weathered cheeks. "My son," he whispered in German, voice breaking, "I knew you were alive." A father's heart never forgets. Then switching to accented English, he added, "Every night I looked at the mountains and asked them to keep you safe." They listened. Behind him, Swiss authorities waited. Charles Halden had been arrested at Zurich airport with 2 counterfeit passports and 10 million in bearer bonds, all stolen from the Halden family bank. He had been fleeing to Brazil, hoping extradition laws would save him. "Your uncle confessed everything," Richard said, voice trembling. "My own brother. He comforted you for 26 years while knowing where you were. He held my hand at your mother's funeral, knowing she died broken, believing you were gone. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the Halden estate in Switzerland. The mountains I had dreamed about for 26 years were real, the peaks rising like silent guardians in the morning sun. Richard walked beside me, leading me through halls lined with photographs documenting the life stolen from me. Baby pictures, my first steps, a second birthday with a train-shaped cake. He stopped at a door on the second floor, fingers trembling on the handle. "I couldn't change anything," he said softly. "Your mother wanted this ready for you when you came home." The room was a time capsule, small bed with blue sheets, 1980s toys carefully arranged on shelves, Swiss-German books waiting to be read. On the nightstand sat a silver-framed photograph of a woman with golden hair holding a laughing toddler. "Your mother, Helena," Richard said, picking up a small violin from the corner. "She believed you'd return. You would sit for hours listening to her play. Your first word wasn't mama or papa. It was music." He handed me the instrument. "She would want you to have it." Adjustment wasn't easy. Broken German surfaced in unexpected waves, surprising me when I suddenly understood full conversations. I still flinched when Richard moved too quickly, still woke at 5 a.m. expecting Lila's harsh voice. Trauma doesn't vanish with truth, but he never rushed me. "You've been strong alone for so long," he said during one of our mountain walks. "Now let me be strong for you. We have time." The trial drew international headlines. Swiss banking heir found after 26 years of captivity. Uncle orchestrates decades-long kidnapping for fortune. American couple in Nebraska raised kidnapped billionaire's son. Media attention was intense, but Richard shielded me from most of it. Charles Halden's arrest exposed a corruption network that reached the upper echelons of Swiss banking. He had embezzled over $400 million during my absence, hiding crimes behind the illusion of my death. 7 other families came forward with similar stories of children disappearing under suspicious circumstances when inheritance laws favored their removal. Only 3 had been found alive. The Prices faced life sentences. During sentencing, Mark tried to claim they had given me a good life, that I should be grateful. The judge's reply was swift and merciless. "You tortured a child for money. You conspired to murder him for profit. No gratitude is owed to kidnappers and would-be killers." Tyler received 15 years after agreeing to testify against his parents. His testimony revealed months of planning, researching suicide methods, practicing my handwriting, even purchasing the drugs they intended to use. I felt a weight lift as justice was served. Yet the scars, both seen and unseen, reminded me of what it truly took to reclaim a life stolen so completely. They would have staged it carefully, making it seem like I had overdosed on pills taken from Lila's medicine cabinet. A note would have been left behind, claiming I couldn't handle the disappointment of being a worthless orphan. Last month, Mr. Donovan called me. His voice trembled with something between anger and sorrow. I knew something was wrong, he said. No child should flinch that way when someone raises a hand. I called child services twice, but the prices always had explanations, medical records claiming behavioral issues. I should have done more. I'm sorry. I told him there was nothing to apologize for. His small acts of kindness had kept me alive when the world felt cold and unyielding. The $20 bills slipped into my hand, the extra lunches, the gentle words reminding me I had value. He had been the only human warmth in a frozen existence. The $95 million trust fund was restored, but money could never replace what I truly gained. My identity, my history, my dignity. I am Ethan Halden now, my true name, which I carry with pride. My past isn't a tale of a helpless orphan, but of a son who was loved, sought after, and never forgotten. Richard Halden, my father, now guides me through the life stolen from me. We pore over photo albums of my mother, Helena, whose music-filled home I barely remember, yet whose love echoes through the objects and images she left behind. He teaches me the banking business, the responsibilities of wealth, and the lessons I will one day use to rebuild not just an empire, but a legacy of integrity. Therapy has been a cornerstone of my recovery. Dr. Hoffman, a trauma specialist in Zurich, helps me untangle years of fear and manipulation, showing me that surviving does not mean forgetting. You kept yourself whole despite everything, she tells me. That isn't just survival. That's triumph. Yesterday, I legally reclaimed my true name, Ethan Richard Halden. The judge asked if I was certain, given that Daniel Price had been my identity for decades. But Daniel was never real. He was a prison constructed of lies, a mask to hide a theft. Ethan is the boy who was loved, searched for, and never abandoned, even when he had almost forgotten himself. The investigation continues. More arrests, more revelations, and more families discovering the truth about children stolen or hidden for personal gain. Charles Halden will face justice. His empire of lies has collapsed, and the Prices lost everything. Their house seized, their reputations destroyed, their freedom gone. I don't dwell on them anymore. I focus on life, on learning, growing, and reclaiming the years stolen from me. Richard and I take morning walks in the Alps, where he teaches me about integrity, banking, and the responsibility that comes with wealth. Next month, I begin university in Zurich, studying economics and literature, finally pursuing the education that was denied to me. Sometimes, I stand on the balcony of my home, gazing at the mountains that watched over my childhood dreams. The journey of 26 years has taught me the difference between mere survival and truly living. The Prices tried to reduce me to nothing. Charles Halden tried to erase my existence. They all failed. I endured. I thrived. And this isn't the end of my story, it's just the beginning. For anyone reading this who has faced their own darkness, know that truth and justice can prevail. Every voice, every act of sharing, every story passed forward can be a beacon for someone still trapped. Courage, resilience, and hope are stronger than fear, and the path to freedom is always worth walking.